Welcome to The Top Out, the show where we talk with entrepreneurs and investors about how they got started, the companies they run, and how they see the future. Brought to you by Redpoint Solutions. Hey, Andrew, how's it going?
Doing great, Dana. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Likewise. It's been a little while.
Yeah, totally. Well, I appreciate you jumping on. I'd love to start a little bit at the beginning and just learn more about kind of the first part of your career and like what led you into founding companies and founding Choosel.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, where should we start? Yeah, after college, I moved out to San Francisco and was kind of searching. There was a lot happening kind of in the digital space, obviously Internet 1.0. So this is, the right at the end of the 20th century as it was, 1999, 2000. Sure. And originally actually got into banking because I, thought that was a good, solid career to get into with my economics degree. But quickly, just the energy and the growth and the entire emergence of the internet economy was happening in real time in San Francisco right around then. And so I lasted in financial services for about 2 weeks and then jumped into one of the early internet startups that focused on monetization in media called L90 or Latitude 90 originally. And being a non-technical background, I kind of focused on what was going to be driving the business model for the internet. And because it was such a unique new model, it seemed pretty destined to be open and free, therefore largely ad supported. I jumped into an early internet startup and then continued to focus on digital media from there. Go ahead.
Did you not know that this was going on in San Francisco when you moved up there?
When I was in college, and I would say I wasn't necessarily an early adopter, I was not using a dial-up modem and so forth, but we were starting to use email more regularly. Things like, web distributed email like Hotmail became prevalent my senior year. And before I, traveled to Europe, it was a big revelation to have some of these tools. So it was certainly building, right? Most people were getting their laptops. But when you go to the epicenter, and I would argue, Silicon Valley, San Francisco at that time was certainly the epicenter. It was just an incredible amount of energy, amount of investment, amount of new companies. And obviously it proved to be overinvested and overhyped in some regards. Obviously there was a crash coming in 2001, but everything goes through its waves. And it was quite apparent that the digitization of the entire economy was at its infancy. And that's what really piqued my interest and why I wanted to try to jump in and figure out how I could be a part of this whole new internet economy.
Is that did Choosel kind of come out of that experience working in digital media was it a couple of years or how long were you kind of doing?
Yeah, I was with that startup for a couple of years and we went through, a huge wave, went public and, out of business after the crash. Worked for a couple other companies, went to grad school down at UCLA, worked for a bigger company after grad school called Interactive Corp, who at the time owned assets including Expedia and Ticketmaster, City Search. It was kind of running monetization and ad sales teams there. And then from there progressed into the startup world, first for a company called Passenger, where I kind of jumped in and did biz dev. A really neat idea of, trying to do distributed social networks kind of before. It was probably a little bit ahead of its time, but a really cool company, great founders. And I was able to really understand what the venture-backed model was, what raising capital meant, how board meetings were structured, et cetera, working closely with the founders. And then from there, I actually moved to Colorado in 2012 and jumped into a partnership called RGM Alliance with another founder, Cameron. And we grew that business very successfully, but it was still very much based in kind of the network model of we were helping other websites kind of get scale by putting them together, solving for that fragmentation, hence the ad network, and then going and selling ads on those. And so it was at that time that, kind of the seeds were being sown for Choosel because you saw these great companies that were really solving for this problem. Because when I started even back in 99, all the way through, that startup, it was still very hard to buy digital media. It was still often through phone calls, even faxes early on, certainly emails, spreadsheets. It was not automated, right? It was not software driven. And it was the likes of Invite Media, some of the early Right Media that was bought by Yahoo, Invite Media was bought by Google. You can start to see these companies are really focused on software-based transaction in the internet advertising space. So that was kind of a light bulb went off that, okay, this is going to be the next wave, because it's obvious that the internet is a gigantic medium with amazing engagement that, may have infinite growth. However, if it's very inefficient to buy the advertising on it, it makes it very difficult to make it a scalable medium for most advertisers. And that was the promise of what became programmatic, right? It unlocked software-driven digital advertising buying, and it solved, the problems for big advertisers, which again was scale. The idea that you could go through a single software system and buy across thousands, if not millions, of websites with targeting. And then it also solved the other end of the spectrum for small advertisers. The small advertisers couldn't go to ESPN.com and say, hey, I want to buy $5,000 worth of advertising, right? There just wasn't scale there. But through a programmatic system, they could buy $5,000 worth of advertising across ESPN and perhaps 100 other sites that may be sports oriented, may not. So that was really that next revolution that we're still in the midst of right now with ad technology, marketing technology, that it has become completely software driven. And that's where Choosel jumped in. We started the company in 2012. And we actually, the first iteration was more focused on a media creation platform. And like most startups, we kind of, pivoted / evolved our way into more traditional ad tech through a way of a couple of partnerships and a couple of timely introductions to folks who kind of guided us that way. And what we saw at that time, circa 2013, was programmatic advertising was really taking off, but it was really only serving at that point enterprise players, both on the advertising and the publisher side. So, the Coca-Colas of the world, obviously, and they were leveraging the big advertising agencies to run these big systems. And so our thought was, if we could really simplify programmatic advertising with really thoughtful and intuitive based software and a user interface, we could get a wider audience. We could get the medium-sized media buyer, the mid-sized agency, the small business to use this great, powerful programmatic medium. So that was our thesis. We got the original platform to market in 2014. And yeah, we've just been really growing ever since, continue to evolve our focus. And in that time span, obviously, 2014 to today, programmatic has really expanded, meaning, in its infancy, or even as it was maturing, it was still more of the remnant inventory of the internet. Fast forward to today, through programmatic systems like Choosel and many other buy-side systems, you can get high quality premium inventory across pretty much every medium that has a digital footprint, right? So think, digital audio on the likes of, Pandora and Spotify, high quality connected TV ads, through the big screen on high quality programming and sporting events in real time, online video across any screen, of course, banners, etc. So everything's become more programmatic. Even digital billboards now, is digital out of home has a huge growth pattern too. So as we've evolved, the medium has evolved as well. And so, I think Choosel was definitely the beneficiary of focusing on, the right part of an industry that was growing really fast and continues to grow.
How much of just success in general do you think is tied to like being at the right place at the right time? Because it sounds like you guys saw a wave coming and just decided like, we're already in this industry, let's just keep riding this wave.
I think it's hard to quantify. It is a gigantic reason for any company's success, right? Is being at the right place at the right time. I guess the argument is, how did you get there, right? How did you put yourself in the right place at the right time? And if the one thing I've always kind of focused on and had some good mentors early in my career was, if you're going to build a business, focus on an industry that's pretty large and ideally has a high growth rate, because it's going to give you more opportunities to fail, to innovate, to change, right? If you go fairly niche with a unique solution in a small market that may not be growing fast, you may only get one shot. And so we definitely intentionally focus on digital advertising and programmatic specifically because of that. So to answer your question, it really is everything, right? And competition increased over time. And again, bigger markets tend not to be, depending on how you define, digital advertising, walled gardens. Certainly the open web is not, a one winner takes all type of scenario. So right place, right time is really everything. But I think any entrepreneur can help to try to find those right markets and the right timing to enter them.
Yeah. So ad tech and telephony, these are the two industries that I can't seem to wrap my head around, or maybe I don't want to wrap my head around. But
Right.
can you walk us through the use case? So say you're a small business owner,
Mhm.
medium-sized business owner, and you want to start doing some advertising for whatever purpose. Like how do you engage with a tool like Choosel, and what does it allow you to do that you couldn't do previously or can't do without it?
That's a great question. And the way to think of it is if I'm a business of any sort, big, small, and want to drive engagement, business results, outcomes, purchases, clicks, you really look at the digital side of things. And obviously, there's still traditional media. Most of
Yep.
them are waning, whether terrestrial radio, print, even linear TV, which I don't think necessarily linear TV and connected TV is kind of really pulling down the delineation between traditional media and new media. In my opinion, it really is just becoming media again. But to answer your question, when you look at it if I'm looking at the digital sphere, which I'll concentrate on, it's largely kind of three big pieces of the pie of where the dollars can go. Search, right, which is obviously dominated by Google. There's obviously other secondary options there. That tends to be lower funnel, right? When you go to search for something as a consumer, you already have some sort of purchase intent in mind. And often your actions to get to the search are affected by many other engagements with a brand or medium over time. And so search is a big part of that, the actual ad buying pie. But again, remember, it sits more at the bottom of the funnel. Social, huge part of it, right? Obviously dominated by Facebook, but TikTok is quickly becoming a huge player in the space. The numbers seem to grow exponentially by the day. The likes of Snap, Instagram, part of Facebook or Meta. So that is the big social part of the pie, and then everything else is kind of what we consider. It used to be called display. I'd rather call it open web. And so because
Okay.
search and Google is a walled garden, the social networks themselves are walled gardens. Amazon, which is growing a huge advertising business,
Yeah.
both in search and e-commerce, but also open web is a walled garden. So the open web is kind of everything else. So search, social, then everything else. And again, everything else, I would argue is basically the ads you'd see on ESPN.com, the ads you would see on your TV when you're watching a connected TV show through Hulu, through Fire TV. It's also anything you'd see online on your mobile phone, on your tablet. Like that is the open web. If you're basically not in social media, you're not search, it's everything else. And most advertisers should have a healthy balance between the three. And so to answer your question, most people know how to get started with search and social, right? You can go to Facebook, you can set up an account, you can start buying advertising. They've made it very easy. Same with search with Google and the other secondary. Open web's a little bit more complex because of the incredible fragmentation, right? And that's why you typically need a demand side partner, demand side platform, DSP, with the likes of Choosel that'll help you do the advertising buying into this fragmented world. So it helps to
Mm.
solve for that problem. So if I have $1 that I'm going to spend on advertising, I may put 30 or 40 cents into search, 30, 40 cents into social, and maybe the balance into the open web. And understanding that they aren't, all of those systems work interdependently, right? As a consumer, if you're shopping for a new bike, as an example, you may start that journey and look online a couple times, right? And you may make a couple phone calls. You may start doing your research. Then you get that effect that you feel like advertising is following you around. It's because the systems are so smart. They understand that you now have intent. They're able to show you things that you may be interested in. You may click on a few ads. You check them out. You may be targeted with your connected TV, with the different advertising. Even there might be a brand that's trying to conquest you to influence your purchase decision. And then ultimately, you'd either go directly to that website to start the purchase path, or maybe go to Google because you can't quite remember the name of that bike or their website and search. And so then Google takes you to that website, or you see a great Instagram ad that reminds you that you wanted to buy that bike and you click on that. So there's many different ways that the journey can go, and they all kind of push you down the funnel. And that's why smart marketers both want to invest in multiple mediums, namely again, search, social, open web, and then measure the overall effectiveness to those and look at it holistically to drive that outcome. So for the average advertiser, there's many great buy-side partners. And if you want more of a less hands-on approach, that's where agencies, most advertising agencies and consultancies can come in and provide those services on your behalf. Here's what I'm looking to do. They'll have
Yeah.
expertise in running search, social, open web, and they can help you as well.
Let me throw like a curveball question at you about search.
Please.
Um, why do you think that Twitter and Reddit in particular have not emerged as big search businesses? Because when I think about half my life is basically like Twitter things. Not that I'm very active on Twitter, but it's like tech stuff and software and startups. If I want advice on like the coolest little project management tool or whatever little SaaS thing is out there, I want to go to Twitter, right? That's where all the smart tech people are. If I want to do
Yeah.
research on buying a mountain bike, I want to do that on a place like Reddit because I don't mountain bike, but I assume the mountain bike community on Reddit is probably like super knowledgeable and active and engaging.
Yeah.
Why do you think places like that haven't been able to build big or build any search businesses? Seems like they have great
Well,
content.
I think kind of reverse the question a little bit is, well, they should, right? They have the engagement, they have the expertise, therefore they have the content. I don't know the answer of why those two businesses specifically have not, but it's absolutely relevant, right? Meaning, in terms of, I also use Twitter a lot, and I do think that they are undervaluing their business by not putting the right level of sponsorships and advertising that can be super highly relevant, right? So to answer the question is they just haven't done as good of job of doing that at the likes of Meta with Facebook and Instagram, and certainly search itself. And so that's where a lot of activist investors can look at Twitter and say this business should be worth more, right? They have a huge base, not as big as Facebook as an example, but highly engaged, highly targeted audiences. And my guess is they should and will get better at that over time, right?
Yeah.
If they are good at executing against, taking that engagement, then over time on Reddit and Twitter, it should be right there. I'm talking about this bike. I'm talking to an expert. They should have a seamlessly great, targeted, thoughtful ad that helps me finish that purchase journey or start it, depending where you are in the funnel. So it's a hard question to answer. I know they have big teams at both of those companies that are probably trying to solve it. But I think if they can, it unlocks a tremendous amount of value for those businesses, right? That way you're not leaving Reddit, then going to Google and searching, and then Google gets the credit for that search and that purchase.
Yeah, for sure. So just coming back to Choosel, so you ran that business for like 10 plus years. What was the evolution of that like? Did you guys raise venture funding, or what did the growth look like over that time?
We did. Yeah, we started in 2012, and we raised a very small angel round of about $500,000, mostly family and friends at that point, like most startup businesses. So going on almost 10 years. And then we raised once we got a little bit of traction and we kind of pivoted to the ad tech space, we raised a seed round, a little over $1 million at that point. We got a little bit more seasoned investors, a couple of professional seed investors, one based in New York. And that helped us kind of cement that platform and get us on our path. So circa 2014, we entered the market with a new platform, started really getting traction, and we're really getting good client growth. That's when we raised a Series A, and we brought in more institutional money at that point. That family-based office also led our A1 and B rounds. Oh, wow. And then most recently, we brought in Boathouse Capital last May. And that was really an opportunity for us to provide a return to shareholders and then still focus on the growth of the business, because we weren't ultimately ready to exit the business yet, but we're able to provide a return and then also bring in some really sophisticated, thoughtful investors into the cap table and into the board of directors as well. So now we're still currently on that path. So we did raise a lot of money, and yeah, certainly the business changed many times over those years. You have so many different iterations. There's different mini business cycles that affect marketing and advertising. We grew from the original two co-founders, and we launched with 4 full-time employees when we finally raised that capital in the fall of 2012. We were in Galvanize, which is the first kind of co-working space before they became more of an education school, over in Golden Triangle, with a lot of other startup businesses that kind of came out of that space. Many I'm so really friendly with, a lot of those CEOs. And it is really cool to see the different evolutions of the business over time. There's certain places where you cross 10, 20, 40, 50 employees. Now we're close to 80. And the business kind of really changes each time. And I think the one thing we've always tried to do, up until I stepped down as CEO in May, was really focus on not just what we're doing, but most importantly, how do we want to work, right? Like what kind of a company do we want to be? In another way, it's culture, right? And I think culture is thrown around quite a bit. But if you're not sincere and you're not deliberate about the type of culture you want, there is no real culture. And I think every business was really challenged, obviously, in 2020 with the advent of the pandemic and COVID-19 of, what is culture becoming, right? And I think a lot of us are still trying to figure that out in a not post-COVID world, but a post-isolation world, I guess I will call it, at least at this point. Figure out, are we going to work in the office? How do we work together? What does collaboration mean? What do our employees value with flexibility? And the big things I think about as the former CEO of Chisel and still a very involved board member is, especially for small, medium-sized companies, what is the identity in this flexible hybrid work environment, right? We can't compete with the biggest companies out there in terms of salaries and benefits, generally speaking. But we used to be able to really compete on culture and opportunity and growth, but that's changed, right? Again, the growth and opportunity is still there, but the culture has changed. And I do believe, the likes of Choosel, we do focus on a hybrid work environment. We focus on about 2 days a week. I think we really, that's the kind of company we want to be. We want people that want to be together, not necessarily all the time. As leaders of the company, we totally understand the benefits of flexibility and providing that. And quite frankly, you need to be able to provide that flexibility to be competitive in today's work environment. But we also want people that do want to buy into being around each other and building relationships and understanding that there is value in seeing people face to face and having both personal relationships that foster over time and professional relationships and creative collisions that just don't happen when you're sitting in separate rooms, often in separate states. And so I think this will continue to evolve. If I had my druthers, I'd probably have the team work in office a little bit more, but trying to find that happy medium of providing the structure and environment that provides a return on those people's time to come into the office, right? But again, also providing that flexibility to remain competitive in the marketplace. So still a lot of chapters to be written about the evolution of culture, I think, in a hybrid world.
Yeah, I think it gets really messy, honestly, because I think that there's real value that you get out of being in the office. And you touched on some of those things, like the conversations, like water cooler conversations or the creative collisions. But then people also use working at the office as a proxy for what's your dedication to the company and your motivation level. And sort of like, hey, if you're in there every day at 8 a.m., for 12 hours, that really shows that you're dedicated. And I don't know. I think we probably need to mature from that. I don't think that just going to the office is a good proxy for it. I'm sort of fully on board with remote work, but I hate working from home. So I prefer working in an office, but not with the whole team. It's just not realistic anymore. And as you expand, so are you guys now hiring folks all over the country? Have you transitioned your sort of talent base outside of Colorado?
For Choosel, it's still primarily based in Colorado, but we don't disqualify candidates that are out of state. Mm-hmm. We tend to prioritize those because, again, we decided as a company, and this will evolve as I'm no longer running the company day to day, but we kind of made a decision, a year and a half ago that we want to be deliberate, right? Meaning that we do want people. Let's define the culture and attract the people that want that type of company that want hybrid. We don't want to hire people that want to be 100% remote, right? That doesn't fit into our culture. And trying to fit in a talent that's not a good cultural fit, it doesn't pay off, right? Medium and long term, especially. So, we consider distributed. We have lots of people that want to take extended travel, right? Absolutely support that. Hey, I'm going to the West Coast for a month. I'll be working these days. We've had flexible, unlimited PTO for years now, and it's. The real point is, what are you focused on as a company and at the team level? And if you focus on the goals and the performance and you're measurable and accountable and realistic, that really defines the work. And some people may need to work 4 to 6 hours a day. Some may need to work 10. Some can do it remotely, sitting on a beach lounge, or some cannot. And so I think if you define with a level of, maturity and almost like a trust with the employees, this is what we expect, we have flexibility on how we're going to get there. And it's not the same for everyone, right? Some people like you want to go into an office, even if it's a WeWork, just to have that non-home feeling, right? So everybody's different. And that was the real challenge, right? Because early in the pandemic, we took a lot of polls, and it's just at one point, I'm I just don't know if there's a lot of value here because, one, I think there's so much disparate opinion. There's never going to be a consensus on what we should do, obviously, even at the leadership level. And two, I think there's also a lot of anchoring, when you, especially doing things like surveys and polls, where everyone's going to anchor to freedom, right? Because you can always come to the office if you want to. So it'll be interesting. Choose will have some decisions to make about, do we want to have, our lease will be coming up, I think, next year or so. It's like, do we want to have a home base and an identity, right? Is it worth making that investment to have seats for 80 to 100 people, knowing that we may only be there a couple days a week, right? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the way it evolves. But again, I think companies that are delivering, because there were companies that were fully remote pre-pandemic
Yeah.
and that were very successful. And so I think it's less about like, what does the market demand, and each company kind of figuring out this is the type of company we want to work. And I think some companies can be successful saying, hey, we're gonna be the kind of company that comes in and works every day. We want to attract those people, whether it's people like the buzz of being in the office or appreciate the accountability, and those companies will be successful in their own right as well. So yeah, I just think it'll be interesting. I've heard some amazing stories of people that now travel the world and work for big tech companies. Often their employers don't even know where they are, and they're able to perform. Why not, right? So it's an interesting new world for sure.
Totally. So you founded Choosel and then you served as CEO for like over 10 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you define it. We incorporated in the fall 2012, so just less than
Yeah.
10 years since incorporation, but we had about a year of work preparing to get getting Choosel ready to launch.
Got it. And so what was the experience like the past year or so? I don't know how long you've been working on Ventura, but what was the experience
Yeah.
kind of leading up to wanting to kind of branch out and do something new?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year or so because we had a unique opportunity that became Ventura. We tried to decide whether that should be a Choosel branded company or not. It was in a similar space, more focused on consultation and reselling. Ultimately, we decided to create a new brand, a new company, and I was running both of those from my role as CEO of Choosel because there was some interest from both sides. Ultimately, throughout the spring and then eventually May, we said, why don't we break these two things apart a little bit more cleanly? And I think my desire to really focus on something that was a little bit earlier stage and have that impact, but also have the upside of remaining working very closely with Choosel on the board. Obviously still a large equity holder,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's time for a change, right? And especially with Choosel after 10 years, I do think there can be a better leader and leadership team that can come in and take the business to the next level. And I'm the first one to say it's hard to see some of the business challenges and opportunities and strategies that may need changing when you've been in it for a while. And I would say even since May, approximately 3 months that I've been out of the day to day at the board level, it's given me such clarity of how we can solve these problems and move more quickly. And I say problems, opportunities. Every business has challenges.
Yeah.
If you're in business without a challenge, it's not really a business, right? So it's been a really cool transition, and it's allowed me to kind of get back into the grind of the startup with our great Ventura team. We launched back in January with my co-founder, Martin, Scott, Nicky, and the great founding team, including Sam and Mike. They're off and running. And so I'm very blessed to have that balance of nitty gritty kind of startup again, then also a more mature company that we're thinking very thoughtfully about on the board level, where on the board, you're playing a little bit more chess, right? Where it's like you can kind of see the board from a higher level and where it should go. So it's been a very unique and rewarding transition, and I look forward to helping them both be successful over time.
Yeah. Is it fun getting to kind of bounce between those things? Like super early stage, I would imagine is very like inspiring and kind of intellectually challenging in one way. And then the total other end of the spectrum of being, a little bit above the day-to-day operations and looking down. Like to me, that sounds incredibly fun to kind of bounce between them.
Yeah, I love it. I think I'm a person that always kind of valued context switching. I know some
Yeah.
people may take longer to say I'm shifting gears and doing something else. A day to day now is like, yeah, we're having a strategic meeting about new leadership teams at Choosel, and then my next call is about trying to do accounts receivable, very small new account. It is quite different, and I relish both of them, right? Because they're both unique and interesting, and I really do love all of it. And it's Choozel's still on a great growth pattern, and the new company Ventura, which is in the similar space but focuses. Choosel is a software solutions company that offers services to execute the advertising. Ventura is a reseller and consultant of leading ad tech technology and services as well. Similar space, very different model, very little crossover. And so it's fun to be able to solve these problems at the same time on two different levels. It has been incredibly rewarding, right? And it is a little bit more fun Whereas, I loved the tenure at Choosel and being the CEO, but you don't really realize, how much of a, quite frankly, a grind it can be. And as a founder, you totally get it. And when you're in it, and it is your founders are different because it is your baby, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And you almost have to be torn away from the business before you can kind of get the perspective of like, oh, I can add more value perhaps in a different role at a board level and add more value to a new company. So yeah, it's been a crazy, few months, a crazy year, or crazy 10 years, if you want to call it that. But that's what I love. It really comes down to growth and how do you solve problems largely through talent and finding great people to solve problems to drive growth. And Choozel's at a different, level of solving those problems versus Ventura, the new company as
Yeah.
well.
Well, this might be a weird question because you're only a few months into like officially launching the new thing. But if you zoom out and think about like a
Mhm.
career arc, do you think that you'll continue to do this sort of like seeding ideas in one way or another and sort of spinning out new businesses and taking them, 0 to 1, 0 to 4? Or do you think you got like, this is the thing, you're going to do this for a long time?
Um, I guess one way to ask, will I ever have a more traditional operating role? I don't know, right? I, I like the idea of helping companies ideally a little bit more
Hmm.
strategically. And with Ventura, being, basically kind of the investor and principal, work very closely with the team. And I think as ideally my career progresses, I do more of that over time, which is, you can help grow a company through a variety of different ways, typically, labor and capital, right? Um, as my career progresses, I ideally would love to contribute more capital, be an investor, ideally helping teams find or helping to build teams ideally that can solve big problems, and then you can be a little bit more hands off, right? In a lot of ways you get a lot of leverage. That's the whole reason that people do invest and do venture capital is the idea
Yeah.
that you can not necessarily for the returns for me personally, but to kind of to keep doing something right, but ideally with a little bit of freedom as you do it as well. So I do think that will be kind of my path, will be Ventura, and in its success, hopefully to seed some other businesses over time that may or may not be anything in advertising technology or in tech in general. I definitely have a lot of interest around real estate as well. I've made a few passive investments on that side. So yeah, excited to see where it goes, but we're so in the infancy of Ventura, it's hard to get that bird's eye view at this
Yeah,
point.
totally. Um, so I know you can't talk totally openly about what's going on at Ventura, but can you give us sort of just like a high level, like what's the sort of mission of the company, or what problem are you guys trying to solve?
Yeah, yeah, it's in ad technology, and over time we'll be able to reveal the specific partners that we're working with. But taking zooming out a little bit, as most technology platforms get to a certain scale, whether it's Salesforce and CRM, whether it's Google and their DV360, which is their ad buying product, as these products scale, most of those entities over time start to build out really healthy consultant slash reseller
Hmm.
networks, right? And for those core companies, it's a great solution to segment the market, provide more of their software services, so they can focus on both the software itself and their biggest clients, right? It helps them getting operating leverage to bring in reseller systems, often to serve the middle and lower markets. So that's what we're doing. Some of the larger scaled systems that we've worked with over the years are now looking to kind of build out this ecosystem. And so Ventura is a beneficiary of getting in early with a few of these large companies to say, hey, we're going to bring these premier products to market into a segment that typically they have not had access to. And so it's in one way it's it's a simpler business model, right? We're not building
Yeah.
software. We are out there, business development, execution, great customer support, making sure people are successful in the systems that we provide. And so that's one reason it was actually quite attractive to me, which is if you can execute, you really can control your destiny. Software, as you may know, is very difficult to
Hmm.
build. Once you build it, you have to maintain it, optimize it, innovate, rebuild, and that's why software, has outsized returns versus most service or reseller businesses, right? It makes sense. And so with you have a much higher, risk beta with software development in general. So I kind of like the idea of, and personally for me, kind of mitigating risk a little bit and balancing out and diversifying, still in the same space. So that's what I can say at this point. And over time, hopefully in the next few months, we'll be doing some more press about exactly who we're servicing in terms of partners and clients. But it's an exciting business. And for me, like I said, it's a little bit of it is refreshing to work on a simpler model where you don't have to necessarily build the software. You just have to go out, service it, and sell it. I'm not precluding myself from investing and or starting software companies down the road. I think there's still so many big problems to solve that are generally software focused, even in ad tech. But I'm going to give it a go on this consultancy/reseller side for a while, and then we'll see what comes after that.
So you guys like hiring people, building a team, doing the whole thing?
Yep, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It's a pretty straightforward template. We know we need the right balance of kind of business development, sales, account management, and then kind of trading specialists for the systems that we are reselling. And so as we hit a certain number of clients, we kind of start building that next layer of team. And then once you get to a certain level, then you have to start thinking about those other functions, around G&A. Like, when do we need our first finance specialist? When do we need our first marketing person? And that's kind of the fun of getting back into it with this great new team that we built. Is everyone's wearing a few of those different hats right now. I definitely, my next call after this is meeting with our QuickBooks specialists. I'm getting back into basic accounting again, marketing, all those pieces. And so it'll be fun to see how this business stacks over time, and how you construct that team. Because when I look back at Choose, I was like, wow, we didn't have a human resources or talent person until we were at 50 employees, which is almost unfathomable to me, right? You don't even know what you don't need until you build a business. But so it's going to be a lot of fun to build.
Awesome. I'm excited to watch. I think it's going to be really cool. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. Really excited to see you again. And it'll be cool to see what happens with Ventura over the next couple of months and years to come.
I appreciate that. Likewise, I appreciate your time as well, Dan. This was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Thanks for having me
talk
on.
to you later. All right. See ya.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Top Out. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next episode, please follow our page on LinkedIn or subscribe to our YouTube. We'll see you next time.